Do you read? Most likely you don't, because we live in a de facto illiterate society. Everyone can read, theoretically. Everyone has to go to school, everyone learns reading in school, this kind of stuff, of course. But really, no one reads nowadays. And the people who do read are kind of... most of the people who would, like, talk of themselves of being a reader or whatnot, mostly read like fantasy or novels and kind of stuff like that, right? So, but when I talk about reading, I mean like reading texts about the world, about how things are, this kind of stuff. So, when I say read, I mean this. So, but why? Why do that? Like, why read? Why bother? Well, because reading is looking at things from the perspective of someone else. You can kind of visualize it like this. You're walking with someone, the author, of course. You're kind of walking on a path, and you're kind of looking at things from, well, where you stand, where you have walked to with the author, right? So normally you look at things from your own perspective, of course. So you only see like one angle of a given thing, of a given whatever it is you're looking at, right? Of how things are. So, or maybe a few angles. And these angles you're looking at the things are mostly the angles which you have either inherited from maybe the point of views of your parents or of your family generally, or of friends, or of school and education and stuff like that. So all the stuff that has kind of formed you and your viewpoint, or also, of course, from books you have read previously. So, but also through the stuff you have thought yourself, obviously. So your perspective, of course, depends on all these things. But reading can now enable you to see things from a different perspective. And not only in the sense that the author tells you, well, this is how I see it, this is my opinion, but that he explains you why he sees it like that. So this kind of image of, well, you're walking with the author on a path is, I think, very fitting, because this walking is exactly the author telling you why, like how he comes to these conclusions. So he argues for his point of view in that sense and makes it plausible. He doesn't just tell you, well, this is my opinion and this is how I see it and that's it. Like this kind of, I don't know, internet, these kind of short opinion pieces. Like this is not what reading is. So you kind of need some space to expand on, or the author, of course, has some space in a book, for example, to expand on his viewpoints. And without this expansion, you don't understand him. So if he doesn't lead you, again, in the image of walking on a path, if he doesn't lead you to his point of view, to his angle of looking at things, you, of course, don't understand it. So, but why not read? So why wouldn't you want to read? Well, because it may be very uncomfortable. Because it may lead to realization and thus require actual change. And when I say require change, I don't mean in a like moral sense or anything like that. Well, I should now change and I should now do this or not do this and stuff like that. But it may lead to yourself actually realizing, well, this is kind of because if you agree, so if you understand, of course, the author's point of view and you agree with him, you might look at the things you have previously looked at or you've previously seen as normal, you may look at them in a new light, as to speak. So you may look at them and think, well, this is kind of weird, right? So, but of course, all of this obviously heavily depends on what you read, and I will get to that in a second. So this discomfort, I think, is also the reason why, as I said in the beginning, we live in a society in which practically no one reads. Like most people, at least I'm always talking kind of in this implicit context of like computer science and like free software and kind of these kind of scientific higher education people. So if I say everyone, I don't mean like, I mean kind of this group, right? So everyone there can read and has read a lot, like, for example, like scientific papers or whatnot. Well, maybe you haven't read scientific papers, but in higher education, you tend to maybe sometimes read or at least skim through some paper, right? So the act of reading and understanding complex thoughts and ideas and abstract topics and stuff like that, this is not that uncommon. But most people don't use it except in their specialized field of work. So they only use it within their they're kind of in whichever category or speciality they have landed with regards to work, or also like scientific work and stuff like that, right? They don't apply this tool of reading to everything else in their lives. Like they think it's like it has to be restricted to like quote unquote science and work and specialized whatever stuff, right? They feel like it cannot add anything to their lives. And I think this is because most people nowadays are so heavily kind of, so heavily integrated into society that they feel subconsciously, or they have a kind of subconscious feeling that reading like critical books may actually lead them to a different viewpoint in which they might realize something about themselves, about the world they live in, which would endanger their current way of life and their current maybe also job position. So I think that people like that kind of know implicitly or through a certain feeling that it may lead to problems in their current way of life and in their current like day-to-day work or whatnot, if they were to realize or if they were to dig deeper, is what I want to say. So if they were to question all of this which they feel like is normal or which they accept as normal, right? So okay, now I've kind of talked about like reading and why read, why not read. And I mean, the kind of why not read, this is not a pro-con argument weighing stuff, right? So this was just kind of me arguing for, or me explaining why I think most people don't read. Of course you should read, of course, like obviously if you want to like know how things are, yeah, obviously. So, but of course it depends on what you read. So, and this has also to do with like what I talked in another video, which was like quantity and quality, right? So books are so high in quality that of course it depends on what you read. Like reading itself doesn't, like, for someone to say, oh, I read a lot, I mean, it means nothing. Like there's so much stuff to read nowadays. You can spend your entire life only reading, but only reading trash because there's so much trash, right? So it depends on what you read, of course. So I think the one book I would recommend everyone, especially if you're like in free software, if you do like the kind of minimal computing stuff and stuff like that, if you're interested in that, I think the one book I would recommend you read is The Technological Society by Jacques Ellul. I've also mentioned this book in a previous video of mine, and I think it's a pretty lengthy work and it's pretty complex, but I think it's the best. Like it's the best work in terms of just understanding the society, or really the modern world we live in, and understanding it through a technological lens, because this is kind of the only lens you can understand it really. And I mean, this book is, Ellul wrote it in I think the 60s. So you might think, oh, well, it's old and dated, but no, it isn't, because he takes on such a viewpoint that it cannot be dated. Of course, the examples he gives might seem dated from today's point of view, but they only show that the dynamics we see today were the same 60 years ago. So nothing on a principles, like on a plane of principles, nothing has changed. Only, of course, the concrete examples which are now, or which he gives, might seem dated, but also not really, because they show you just what we accept as normal today wasn't normal for someone like Ellul 60 years ago. So it kind of shows you, it kind of mirrors your own relative understanding of the world, right? So for example, he gives as one example of like standardization, he gives the example of like railroads, that they have to be standardized. And I mean, have you ever thought about railroads in terms of standardization? Of course not, because this is so normal for us. When we think of like trains, we think, of course, like no one has ever thought of this. I think in our kind of, or in like the last few generations, because it's so normal. Like, of course, yeah, of course. How else like could it be? But if we then apply this to like or not apply this, no, sorry. But if we look at these things with which we take for, like, not, I don't want to say granted, but which we take for normal, we can only then realize our own bias, our own, like, lens, which is very tinted, right? Or tainted? you know what I mean, I hope. So, which is very biased, is what I want to say. So, yeah, I think this book, I think everyone should read it. Yeah, there's no, and also let me also say this: there's no substitute for reading. Like, I can give you a summary, I can, like, talk about this book for hours, and it doesn't mean anything. You have to read the book itself, right, to understand Ellul's viewpoints. It doesn't do anything if I tell them to you. That means nothing. So you have to actually, and also, like, summaries, and don't get me started with AI summaries, please don't, like, please, help, right? Read the book is what I want to say. And also turn off your devices when you read it. And also, yeah, I have this last slide, read on paper. Don't read on screen. I would recommend you to not do that. I mean, LCD screen especially is, like, super bad because it puts so much strain on your eyes, and then your eyes get tired and you stop reading. I mean, no, you have to make reading as comfortable as possible, in a physiological sense, because that way you can read more and understand more and think more, right? So the actual mechanical act of reading has to be very easy and not very straining as with text on a screen. So yeah, LCD screens terrible. E-ink screens are a bit better in that regard because they don't emit light, sure. But still, I would recommend you just read on paper, honestly. Just, like, buy the book. Or what I've done, or what I've started doing recently is, if there is no, like, book I can buy easily with this, you can buy this. I think it's in print still. So you can get this pretty easily. At least I got it pretty easily. Because it's such a great book. It actually, like, you can get it. So, like, you can buy it. What I want to say. But with books that aren't as easy to get, or maybe don't have, like, or which are not formatted nicely, which are, like, cheap print on demand stuff, I tend to just format them myself and just print it out on paper and just bind them myself. So this is what I've also started doing, because I was just really getting tired of reading on e-ink. It's kind of, yeah, I don't know, because sometimes it doesn't work great, and it's kind of, especially if you look at, like, PDFs, it's kind of a hassle, and yeah, I don't know, just read on paper. I think there's no substitute for that. All right, so yeah, I think that was pretty much all I wanted to say. So I think everyone should read like stuff like that, like stuff that questions the world we live in, because otherwise you really can't understand it. If you only read like stuff that says, "Oh yeah, modern world's so great," I mean, where are you moving? Like this makes no sense, of course, and it's also boring to read. So I think it's important to read stuff that kind of lies outside your own sphere of understanding, like outside of your own lens. And yeah, and also, or maybe I should also add this: try to read with an open mind. I mean, everyone says that all the time, right? But in the sense that this guy, like for example, Ellul or any other author, he knows something you don't know, right? He knows a lot of stuff you don't know. He knows so much stuff, or he has so many strong opinions on stuff that he wrote an entire book, or well, in Ellul's case, multiple books. But so he has really thought things through, because if he hasn't, like, why bother? Like, why go to the length of, like, why expand all this energy and all this effort writing a book? Like, right? So there's something there that's worth reading and worth understanding, I think, if at least if you care about how things are. I mean, if you just want to live in your comfortable modern life, I mean, sure, I guess this slide applies to you. So this might be very uncomfortable, because it might lead you to realize something. So yeah, I think that's it. That's all I wanted to say in this video. And yeah, have a nice day.